I got something I want to show you. This is Tormund. He's my little baby kitty. Here, make sounds. When you flip him over and you rub his little belly, he hugs you back. Look at him. You're not looking. Look at him. Look at him. See how he is? Oh, does that fly interest you? What? Do you want to get him? Go get him, buddy. You know what I'm probably not going to do in this video? Is eat him. Because you don't eat your cats. It's just wrong. But when you think about that, you're like, well, but people eat a lot of other animals. Why couldn't you eat that? But then again, I'm just like, look at him. Look at his little fuzzy mitts. I mean, you can't eat that. And I was going to actually do this bit where then when I did like the bars and tones thing, and then I cut away, and then I come back and I've got like some fried chicken here and I'm like munching on it. But I can't even bring myself to do that because I guess sociologists call it a taboo. There are just some things that aren't done. And maybe people don't even remember exactly why they're not done, but they just aren't. And if they do get done, there's this sense of revulsion that happens within a culture at the very thought of certain things, like eating your kitten, which again, I emphasize, I'm not going to do. In Luke chapter 5, we run into a situation where, I'm not allergic to cats, I just had a little bit of an itch. We run into a situation where Jesus encounters somebody who has a thing going on that is socially repulsive. It's unacceptable. It makes you unpalatable to society. And the last thing you do when somebody is in this situation is physically touch them. If you made physical contact with it or even got in too close a proximity to it, it was as though you had contracted the same revolting uncleanness for yourself. So I want to break down Luke chapter 5, verses 12 through 16. So as always, I'm going to put that up on the screen. Pause, read it real quick, and then let's talk about this thing. Where'd you go, buddy? Verse 12 here says, while Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Whoa, we've got an incident setting up right out of the gate for these guys. These onlookers who just abandoned their life to follow Jesus around. They run into an unspeakably grotesque moral taboo. Now, I don't just mean visibly grotesque, and we don't seem to really do a whole lot of the leprosy thing anymore. I mean, there's some stories about leper colonies, like on the island of Molokai, and you hear a pretty neat story there about self-sacrifice and about the just grossness of the disease and the disorder and what it does to the human body. But this is kind of a yesteryear thing, right? Well, in the Bible, leprosy is a generic term used to describe any number of skin afflictions. And we get a little more specific sense in the book of Leviticus and what we call the Old Testament about what those different kinds of afflictions were and how they might manifest. And it's gross. I mean, there's pus and discharge and all kinds of other words you don't like to listen to. But the general concept is that these diseases made one unclean. And this concept of uncleanness is one that goes beyond just being visibly gross, stinking because of open sores and disease. It is one that goes beyond the idea of being contagious in a 21st century sense. And it goes all the way to the level of somehow expressing the spiritual state of insufficiency before God. So the whole idea of God, whether you embrace the idea of God or not, like the notion, the definitional idea of capital G God, is that being which is the greater being than any other than can be conceived of. In this context, we're talking about a being who's unlimited in every way, without flaw, without error, correct in all of his decisions, judgments, inventions, actions. And so you got God, interacting with people. And the story of the Bible is the weird friction that occurs when a perfect deity interacts with imperfect people, and the process by which this perfect deity tries to redeem the messes of the imperfect people. I mean, that's the story. And so uncleanness in the Old Testament really takes on this meaning of illustrating the difference between imperfect man and perfect God. And further, it has social consequences and civil consequences in that people who are unclean in the Old Testament have certain boundaries physically. They can't be around other people. There's even a rule that says you got to go around yelling unclean announcing it repeatedly if you get too close to anybody else. There's a whole process by which you have to present yourself to the priests who kind of governed all of civil life 1,000 and 1,500 years before the time of Jesus, and they would examine you according to the book of the law for all these different things to see how your scabs and cuts and gross things were, and if they determined that you were clean, then you would do some ceremonial cleansing and you're back a part of the community. So again, serves a civil function, but it also illustrates the human condition of brokenness and insufficiency before God. God is perfect, fully clean and righteous and right. Humanity, even if it's not your fault because you didn't mean to get leprosy, is in a continual state of uncleanness and imperfection. So this guy shows up, and partly for religious reasons, partly for cultural reasons, partly for medical reasons, everybody's going to hold their breath. Like, this guy is violating protocol to even be this close to Jesus without yelling unclean again and again. Like, you don't even get near me. You don't even flirt with eating your cat. What the heck is the matter with you? But at the same time, I think everybody would have been really intrigued to find out just how different Jesus is going to be. So when this guy asks, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean, you and I are going to think medical terms. The original audience would have thought, like, clean before God? Well, no one can make a human clean before God. It's not really how it works. And leprosy, if you still have, evidence of leprosy, you can't be declared clean. It's just not how the thing works. Now it just gets crazy. Verse 13, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. It could be argued that Jesus is breaking the law here. But at the same time, Jesus has the authority as the one who is the ultimate arbiter of clean and unclean to do this. And further, the leprosy did go away, like right in front of everybody. Now, I get that a lot of times when we talk about miraculous stuff in the Bible, or especially miraculous stuff nowadays, that seems to, at least to me, smack a little bit more of clever sleights of hand and hoaxes. But in the Bible, it's easy to be like, wow, that was a long time ago. People were much stupider back then. They would believe in, dumb tricks and so forth. Or maybe it happened in secret places. But when you really look, what you see is that all of these miracles pretty much happened in front of a bunch of people. And there were a lot of people that other people could have asked to be like, but his leprosy didn't go away like right then, right? No, I was standing right there. Dude's got gross, yellow, mustard, pussy-looking scabs all over him. And all of a sudden, just it went away. Like, even the stinking, rotting smell went away. That's the kind of report that they would have had. So not only does Jesus declare him unclean, but in doing so, he actually physically makes him clean. And an important thing to remember, just interpretively, when you work through especially the Gospels, is that any time you encounter a miracle, it is not just a sweetheart handout from God because you got lucky and you won the God lottery today. Jesus happened to be walking right here. Here, have some free stuff. Or you're super holy. Here's some free stuff. No, it is always about Jesus. It is always about revealing theological truths about who Jesus is and what he's doing and what God is doing. And this is no different. Leprosy is the physical representation of our uncleanness before God. This is an unbridgeable gap in the minds of the people here. This is the kind of thing that is such a social boundary that maybe one could transcend a physical boundary in society through clever science or inventions. Maybe we could, find a way to make ourselves fly like Iron Man. I saw somebody was working on a suit like that the other day. Maybe through cleverness we could transcend physical boundaries. Maybe through careful negotiation, we could work out relational boundaries between people who are deeply at odds with each other. But to just walk in, snap your fingers, and transcend an absolutely impenetrable social boundary is maybe the most impressive thing that I could imagine Jesus doing. It wouldn't impress me when I was a kid. I want eye lasers and flying. But now I get how deeply entrenched these mores and these social norms are. And Jesus just blows the whole thing out of the water right out of the gate in his ministry. So it's tempting to be like, oh, that's right, he healed many, he drove out an evil spirit, did that in chapter 4. Here's probably, this is just another thing. A guy was kind of sick and Jesus healed him. No. This is screaming from the mountaintops that Jesus, to a larger Mediterranean world audience, wields power over the sickness and the social barriers that nobody can break. And to a Jewish audience, it goes even beyond that and into the theological reality of the brokenness of man before God and Jesus' ability to declare it clean. Now, there's another passage that we'll get into here another time, but you remember the one. This is where the room is all packed and crowded, and Jesus is teaching in there. There's some grumpy people there. Some people who are excited are there. The disciples are there. And there's this guy, he's paralyzed, and he can't even get in because everybody's so busy listening to Jesus, and it's a little house. Remember, they go up on the roof, and they lower the guy down on a stretcher, and Jesus is like, whoa, there's a guy from the thing, and the guy comes in, and he's like, what do you want? We want to get healed. And Jesus, knowing that the critics in the audience are there, has this discourse with them about which is harder to do, to say your sins are forgiven or to say to this man, get up and walk. He says, but that you may know, essentially, that Jesus has the power to forgive and the authority in his role, take your mat and get up and walk. And the guy gets up and physically is healed in front of a packed house. Again, there's a theological point that's being made about Jesus' position of spiritual authority that transcends our comprehension of guilt. I know that in your mind and mine, getting leprosy is just a bummer. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong, but that is not what the mindset was of any member of this audience way back in the day. And so for Jesus to do this is a clear, present, and loud announcement that he is judge. And that if he says someone is forgiven, that if he says someone is clean before God, that is his authority. Now, what's interesting here is that and Jesus ordered him, don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. So we're going to see this theme a lot too, of Jesus being like, all right, early in his ministry, like, don't go make a big deal of this right now. And it's pretty evident that as soon as word does start to get out and it draws the attention of the religious leaders down south in Jerusalem, they really don't like it. And it creates a collision course that is inevitable between them and their world teachings and Jesus and his kingdom teachings. And ultimately it leads to Jesus going to the cross. But Jesus isn't ready to go there just yet. He has to build his team and get the disciples ready and accomplish all the things that he needs to accomplish up north first. So that's presumably why he's saying, don't go tell everybody about this. But it's interesting. It's like, go offer the sacrifices and do all the stuff that Moses commanded. And I'll put the reference up here as to where in the Old Testament it talks about what exactly that looks like. But this is interesting because Jesus is saying, okay, honor this process by which you are declared clean, even though I already declared you clean. Why? Oh, he spells it out. As a testimony to them. He wants to make the declaration that there is a way to cleanness, to rightness with God, that is greater than the religious mechanisms of the day, and that Jesus is that way. But he wants to tease that out somewhat slowly, again, to accomplish what he's there to accomplish. Now we get a yet statement. This is kind of like a but statement. Verse 15, yet the news about him spread all the more, so the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. And this is going to be the rhythm we get for most of the rest of Luke. Jesus is trying to accomplish something very public, but isn't quite ready to rope in the debate in Jerusalem and take this thing to the main stage of the world. And we're going to see more and more resistance build. And as we see that pressure build, both from people who like him and are interested, and that pressure build from people who don't like him and eventually would like to kill him, we're going to see him retreat and depend more and more, not more and more, he always depended equally greatly on his relationship with his Father. And that in itself is a fascinating thing, that we get this amazing miracle, and Jesus, instead of fantasizing about how awesome he is now and flying around, again, I keep going back to Iron Man, but like Iron Man, when he's at the party and showing off all of the stuff that he can do, because how cool is that? And wouldn't you do the same? Jesus doesn't do any of this self-aggrandizing stuff. He points to the glory of his Father. His miracles point to the glory of his Father and the reality of what he's there to accomplish. And each one of these little incidents paints a larger picture of just exactly who it is that we're dealing with. And we'll unpack that together as we work the rest of the way through the book of Luke. Look at this. I'm serious. It's ridiculous. He can be running around and playing and have the wild, crazy kitten look. And then you pick him up and you start doing this stuff. And he just falls into this globby puddle of orange. Look at this. You can like flip him all around and pet him like this. He doesn't even care. He's delighted. You doing okay? Yeah, you don't mind a bit. But then if you put him down, do you want to go get some stuff? Do you want to go get the stuff? Go get him. Go get him. The point is, it's really exciting getting to the place where we're starting to hear this intonation that Jesus is the go-between between God and man, that he has the authority to forgive. And there's actually all kinds of hope in that, especially for people who are, well, Christians and pretty excited about Jesus. But I know a whole bunch of you are not Christians who watch this channel. And I think it's just incredible that you would be up for taking the time to try to understand this book. I think it is an ultimate gesture of respect on your part toward your friends who have Christian faith, to put in the effort to understand this and to be able to game that out with them. I think you're awesome. So to every non-believing member of this audience, thank you for being here. I think you're wonderful. Another group of people I need to say thank you to are the patrons who make this channel happen. And really, quite literally, this channel happens because there are patrons behind it. Patreon.com/TMBH helps make more stuff like this happen. I actually have some pretty interesting ideas for what comes next. So we got more coming up on Luke. I've got some other like big, gigantic stuff coming down the pike about visiting other churches and different expressions of Christianity. I'm super pumped about that. I was going to have Tormund wave with his teeny tiny little adorable white paw, but he took off. So I guess I'll just say goodbye. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. Let's do this again soon.